There is a version of blackjack that was so close to a fair game that mathematicians who studied it called it the best bet in the casino. Not the best bet relative to other casino games, which is a low bar given what surrounds it on the floor. The best bet in the sense that a disciplined, prepared player who had learned a specific strategy, a strategy that took maybe 4 hours to memorize and that was published in paperback books available at any bookstore in America, could reduce the house advantage to approximately half of 1%, half a percent. That means for every $200 you wagered over the course of an evening playing correct basic strategy at a fair blackjack table, you could expect to lose, on average, $1. Not $1 per hand, $1 total. The house would keep, on average, $1 from every $200 of action you generated. The entertainment value of an evening of blackjack at those odds was extraordinary by any standard of comparison available in the American leisure market. You got the atmosphere of the casino floor, the social experience of sitting with other players, the intellectual engagement of a game that rewarded preparation and discipline, the genuine possibility of walking out ahead, and the total expected cost was less than a movie ticket. That was the game. That was the blackjack that built the Las Vegas Strip, that filled the tables every night of the week, that created the culture of the American casino player and the mythology of the card player who understood the math and respected the craft. That game still exists. It exists in specific, documented locations that this video will tell you about. What it does not exist on is the main floor of any major Las Vegas Strip casino. Because sometime in the last 20 years, quietly and without announcement, the casinos changed the game. Not the name, not the felt. Not the chips, or the dealer uniforms, or the physical apparatus of the blackjack table, which looks identical to what it has always looked like. They changed the mathematics. They changed the rules in ways that converted the best bet in the casino into a mediocre bet dressed in the reputation of the game it replaced. And the player who sits down at a strip blackjack table in 2026, believing they are playing the game that their grandfather played in 1985, is not playing that game. They are playing a different game with a different house edge that has been carefully designed to look identical to the original while performing entirely differently against their bankroll. This is the story of how they did it. The game of blackjack as it was standardized in the American casino industry from roughly the 1950s through the early 2000s operated on a set of rules that were so player-friendly relative to other casino games that the industry spent considerable resources trying to keep players from understanding just how favorable the game was. The standard rules that a player could expect to find at a major Las Vegas casino during this period were as follows. A natural blackjack, meaning an ace, and any 10 value card dealt as the first two cards paid 3-2. If you bet $100 and received a natural blackjack, you were paid $150. The dealer stood on all 17s, including soft 17, meaning a hand containing an ace counted as 17. Players could double down on any two cards, meaning you could double your initial bet in exchange for receiving exactly one additional card on any starting hand. Not just on totals of 10 and 11, as some casinos restricted, players could split any pair and in most cases resplit if dealt another matching card. Surrender was available at many properties, allowing the player to forfeit half their bet and abandon a particularly unfavorable hand rather than play it to completion. The game was typically dealt from 1 or 2 decks, which created a card distribution that basic strategy could exploit with meaningful efficiency. These rules, combined, produced a game where perfect basic strategy reduced the house edge to between 0.3 and 0.6% depending on the specific rule set. The player who learned basic strategy was playing a game where the statistical advantage of the house was smaller than the variance of the game itself over a normal session, meaning that skill and preparation genuinely influenced outcomes in a way that mattered. The game rewarded knowledge. That is why people loved it. The blackjack that replaced it on the Las Vegas Strip main floor was not introduced through a single policy change. It was assembled through a series of individual rule modifications, each one presented in isolation as a minor operational adjustment that accumulated over time into a compound degradation of the player's position. Understanding the full scope of what changed requires looking at each modification individually and then understanding how they interact, because the house edge calculation in Blackjack is not additive in a simple way. The rules interact with each other, and a set of unfavorable rules combining in the same game produces a house edge that is substantially worse than the sum of each individual modification would suggest. The first and most significant modification was the change from 3-2 to 6-5 on natural blackjack payouts. This is the rule change that the floor manager in the previous video described as the moment he understood that his job was no longer to run a fair game, but to run a game that looked fair. The mathematics of this change are straightforward, but the magnitude is not immediately intuitive, which is why the casinos were able to introduce it without generating the immediate organized resistance that a clearly stated house edge increase would have produced. At 3-2, a natural blackjack on a $100 bet returns $150. At 6-5, the same hand returns $120. The difference is $30 on that specific hand. Over time, the player receives a natural blackjack approximately once every 21 hands. The $30 reduction in payout on that hand, applied once every 21 hands, adds approximately 1.4% to the house edge. 1.4% added to a game that previously had a house edge of approximately 0.5% triples the house advantage in a single rule change. The player who sits down at a 6-5 table, believing they are playing the same game as the 3-2 table, is paying 3 times the price for an identical looking product. The difference is not visible in the rules placard at most properties unless the player specifically knows to look for it and knows what the fraction means. The dealer does not announce it. The pit boss does not mention it. The felt says Blackjack pays 6-5 in the same font and the same size as every other notation on the table surface, and the player who has never been told that 6-5 is dramatically worse than 3-2 for them will not notice the distinction. This is not accidental. The placement and sizing of the payout notation on the felt was a deliberate design decision made with full knowledge that the majority of players would not process it as the economically significant change it represents. The 6-5 rule change was first introduced at a major strip property in 2003 at the MGM Grand. Initially, on single-deck games, where the casino argued the rule change was necessary to offset the player advantage inherent in single-deck play. This framing was accurate in a narrow sense. Single-deck blackjack with 3-2 payouts and standard rules is the most player-favorable blackjack game available in a casino, and it does require a higher house edge offset to be commercially viable for the operator. The problem is that the 6-5 rule was then extended to multi-deck games where no such offset justification existed. A 6-deck shoe game with 6-5 payouts is not a game where the rule change compensates for some other player advantage. It is simply a game with a dramatically higher house edge than the same 6-deck shoe game with 3-2 payouts. The casino industry moved the rule to multi-deck games within a few years of its introduction on single-deck games, and most players did not notice because the stated justification for the single-deck application was plausible, and the extension to multi-deck games happened gradually and without announcement. By 2015, the majority of main floor blackjack tables at major strip properties had converted to 6-5 payouts. By 2020, finding 3-2 blackjack on the main floor of a major strip casino required a deliberate search. By 2026, 3-2 blackjack on the strip's main floors exists primarily as a rumor among the players old enough to remember when it was the standard. The second rule change that compounded the damage from 6-5 was the move to continuous shuffling machines on standard table games. The continuous shuffling machine, or CSM, is a device that sits in the dealer's position, contains the entire deck or shoe complement, and shuffles the discarded cards back into the remaining deck after each hand, rather than allowing the shoe to play out and then reshuffling. The CSM was introduced by the casino industry with a framing that emphasized its benefit to the player: more hands per hour, faster play, no waiting for the shoe to finish before the shuffle. These things are true. The CSM does increase the number of hands per hour. What the framing omitted was that the increase in hands per hour at a house edge of 1.9% produces a significantly higher expected loss per hour for the player than fewer hands at the original 0.5% edge. The player who is losing 50 cents per $100 wagered over 60 hands per hour is losing $30 an hour in expectation. The player losing $1.90 per $100 wagered over 80 hands per hour is losing over $90 an hour in expectation. The faster pace that the CSM provides is not a benefit to the player. It is a mechanism for extracting more expected losses per unit of time from a player who is already being charged a higher rate per hand. The CSM also eliminates the single most meaningful skill dimension available to the informed player in a non-CSM game: card counting, which is legal under Nevada law and which represents the application of a player's own cognitive ability to publicly available information, is the technique by which a skilled blackjack player tracks the ratio of high cards to low cards remaining in the shoe and adjusts their bets accordingly. When the shoe is rich in tens and aces, the player has a statistical advantage on the next hand and bets more. When the shoe is depleted of high cards, the house has a statistical advantage and the skilled player bets less. Card counting is not cheating. The casino has access to the same information the counter uses. The casino has simply never disclosed how much that information is worth to the player who uses it systematically. The CSM eliminates the shoe entirely. There is no accumulation of dealt cards, no depletion of any portion of the deck, no information content in the remaining cards that is different from the full random distribution. The CSM converts blackjack from a game with a partial memory, where what has already been dealt affects what remains, into a game with no memory, where each hand is statistically independent of every other hand. This is the game the casino always wanted: no information, no advantage, no skill component that the player can develop without the casino's permission. The CSM delivered it. The third modification was the proliferation of side bets. Side bets in blackjack are optional supplementary wagers that can be placed alongside the main hand bet and that pay out based on specific card combinations that appear independently of the outcome of the main hand. Perfect pairs pays if the player's first two cards are a pair. 21 plus 3 pays if the player's first two cards combined with the dealer's up card form a poker-style hand like a flush or a straight. Lucky Ladies pays specific amounts if the player's first two cards total 20 with enhanced payouts for specific suit combinations. Insurance pays 2-to-1 if the dealer has a natural blackjack and is available whenever the dealer's up card is an ace. These bets are presented as entertainment options, as additional ways to win, as enhancements to the blackjack experience that give the player more action and more possibilities for exciting payouts. Their actual function is to provide the casino with house edges that range from 3% on the less egregious variants to over 25% on some of the more specific proposition bets. The insurance bet, which is the most common side bet in blackjack and the one that players are most frequently encouraged to take by dealers and by the casino's own signage, has a house edge of approximately 7.7% under standard deck conditions. A player who consistently takes insurance on every opportunity is paying a 7.7% house edge on the insurance wager, in addition to whatever edge applies to their main hand. The side bet revenue generated by these options is not incidental to the casino's table game economics. Side bets have become a significant revenue stream that the industry tracks separately in its financial reporting, precisely because the margins on side bets are multiple times higher than the margins on the base game. The fourth modification was the alteration of the soft 17 rule. Under the traditional rules that prevailed during the period of favorable strip blackjack, the dealer was required to stand on all 17s, including soft 17, meaning a hand that included an ace counted as 17. In subsequent years, an increasing number of strip properties modified this rule to require the dealer to hit soft 17 rather than stand. The change adds approximately 0.2% to the house edge, which sounds minimal until it is added to the 6 to 5 change and the other modifications simultaneously active at the same table. Each modification in isolation is defensible as a marginal adjustment. All of them operating simultaneously at the same table produce a compounded house edge that converts the best bet in the casino into something closer to a bad bet. The fifth modification is the minimum bet escalation. This is not a rule change in the mathematical sense, but it is a barrier to access that functions as effectively as any rule change in limiting the player's ability to manage their bankroll using the strategies that make Blackjack manageable. Blackjack basic strategy assumes the ability to double down, split pairs, and vary bet size in response to favorable conditions. All of these strategies require having sufficient bankroll relative to the table minimum to execute without risking the entire session budget on a single strategy play. A player with a $100 session budget who sits at a $25 minimum table has 4 betting units. They cannot absorb a double down without risking half their remaining session budget. They cannot split aces against a dealer 10 without committing a substantial portion of their total gambling budget to a single hand. The minimum bet that is appropriate for a player's bankroll to execute basic strategy correctly is approximately 1/50th of the session bankroll. A player with $100 should be at a $2 minimum table. A player with $500 is appropriately at a $10 minimum table. On Friday nights at major strip properties in 2026, the minimum at most main floor blackjack tables is $25, and at the central, higher traffic tables, it is frequently $50. The player with a $200 session budget who sits at a $25 minimum table has 8 betting units. They cannot sustain the variance of the game long enough for basic strategy's expected value to express itself. They are not playing a strategy game. They are playing a short session gambling proposition where luck dominates skill because the session is too short and the bet sizes are too large relative to the bankroll for the mathematical expectation to mean anything. The combination of these 5 modifications, the 6 to 5 payout, the continuous shuffling machine, the side bet proliferation, the soft 17 hit rule, and the minimum bet escalation, does not simply add to the house edge. It transforms the nature of the game. It transforms Blackjack from a game of extended sessions and skillful play into a game of high speed, high minimum, side bet laden extractions where the expected hourly loss is substantially higher than most players have any idea they are signing up for when they sit down. A player at a strip main floor table in 2026 playing a 6-deck CSM game with 6 to 5 payouts, hits soft 17, $25 minimum, who consistently takes the insurance side bet and occasionally places a perfect pairs side bet on a hand they feel good about, is playing a game with a combined effective house edge on their total wagered amount somewhere between 4 and 6%. They are not playing blackjack. They are playing a slot machine with cards. The player who knows this can make different choices. They can refuse to sit at 6 to 5 tables, which at this point means refusing to sit at the main floor of virtually every major strip property, but which does not mean refusing to play blackjack in Las Vegas altogether. Downtown Las Vegas still offers 3 to 2 games. The D Las Vegas, which is a property that has made a point of its player-friendly game rules as a differentiating factor in its marketing, offers single-deck blackjack with 3 to 2 payouts and rules that are meaningfully more favorable than anything available on the Strip's main floors. The El Cortez, which is one of the oldest continuously operating casinos in Las Vegas, and which operates in the downtown corridor with a business model oriented toward locals and serious gamblers rather than tourists, has maintained 3 to 2 blackjack as a core offering. The Golden Gate, the oldest hotel casino in Las Vegas, still deals games with favorable rules on its main floor. These properties are not glamorous in the way that the Bellagio is glamorous. They do not have celebrity chefs or infinity pools or partnerships with Formula One racing. They have a blackjack game where the house edge is what it was supposed to be, and where the player who has done the work of learning basic strategy is being respected for that work, rather than charged an extra 1.4%. because the floor manager decided the margin needed improvement. Outside of downtown Las Vegas, the locals casino market offers significantly better blackjack conditions than the Strip across the board. The Station Casino's properties, which the channel has covered extensively in the context of their record-breaking financial performance during the Strip's decline, offer 3-2 blackjack as the standard on their main floors. Red Rock, Durango, Green Valley Ranch, and the other Station properties deal games that a serious blackjack player would recognize as fair. The South Point, which is a locally owned property on the south end of Las Vegas Boulevard that caters almost exclusively to the local market, has maintained player-friendly blackjack conditions throughout the period when the Strip has been systematically degrading its game rules. The Rampart Casino at the JW Marriott in Summerlin deals hand-shuffled single-deck games with rules that approach the ideal from the player's perspective. These properties are not hidden. They are not difficult to access from the Strip. They are a 20-minute drive from anywhere on the Strip corridor, and they are operating games that the Strip stopped offering a decade ago. The deeper question, the one that goes beyond the practical advice about where to find better games, is why the rule degradation was allowed to happen at the scale it did, and over the time period it did without triggering the organized consumer resistance that would normally constrain this kind of product quality reduction in any other industry. The answer is the same answer that explains every other degradation documented in this series. It happened incrementally. It happened in a market where the incumbent operators had sufficient brand power and geographic concentration to sustain the product change long enough for the new baseline to become normalized. It happened in an information environment where most players did not have access to the specific, technical knowledge required to understand that what they were experiencing was a substantive change rather than a natural market evolution. And it happened because the casino industry's regulatory structure is oriented toward ensuring the integrity of the games, meaning ensuring that the random number generators are truly random and that the cards are fair, rather than toward ensuring the fairness of the rules under which the games are offered. Nevada law requires that a blackjack table pay at least some amount on a natural blackjack. It does not require that the amount be 3-2. The 6-5 payout is legal. It is disclosed on the felt. The regulatory obligation is satisfied. The player's obligation under this structure is to read the felt carefully before sitting down and to understand what they are reading. Most players do not do this. The casino industry understood that most players would not do this when it changed the rules. The rule change was deployed against the grain of the player's information deficit, and the casino understood that information deficit was real and would persist long enough for the new rule to become normalized. The normalization has happened. The player who has never played blackjack at any other time than the current era does not experience 6-5 as a degradation. They experience it as the rules of blackjack. The comparison to a better game is not available to them because they have no experience of the better game. The player whose first blackjack experience was at a Strip main floor table in 2022 does not know that they sat down at a game with a house edge 3 times higher than the game their parents played at the same property in 2002. They know how to play the game. They do not know that the game they learned is not the game their parents played. The institutional memory of what blackjack was supposed to be is being lost as the generation of players who knew the difference ages out of the casino market, and the generation that learned the degraded version takes their place. In 20 years, the knowledge that blackjack once offered a 0.5% house edge to a basic strategy player will be the kind of historical footnote that requires a video to explain because nobody currently playing the game will have experienced it firsthand. The casinos understand this. They are waiting it out. The normalization process has a timeline, and the timeline is the biological replacement of the player population that remembers. What can be done by the individual player today is specific and actionable. Never sit at a table without reading the felt and confirming the payout for a natural blackjack. If the felt says 6-5, stand up and leave. The 5 seconds this takes and the mild social awkwardness of leaving a seat you just took are worth more to your bankroll than any other decision you will make at the table. Find the payout notation, confirm it reads 3-2, and sit down only then. Learn basic strategy before you play, not a simplified version. The full basic strategy chart, which is available for free from multiple sources including the Wizard of Odds website, which has been the definitive free resource for casino game mathematics for over 25 years. Learn it, practice it with a free app, and play it without deviation at the table. It is not complicated. It requires approximately 4 hours of focused memorization to reach the level of fluency where you can apply it without hesitation at the table. 4 hours to reduce the house edge to the level where you are playing the best bet in the casino. Do not take insurance, ever, regardless of what the dealer tells you about it being smart to protect your blackjack against a dealer ace. Insurance has a negative expected value for the basic strategy player in virtually all circumstances, and its attractive presentation as a form of protection is one of the most effective sales techniques in the history of casino floor. Management. Do not take side bets, any of them. Perfect pairs, 21 plus 3. Lucky ladies. Any supplementary wager that has a name and a payoff table separate from the main game has a house edge that is higher than the main game. Some of them dramatically higher. They are revenue generators for the casino, masquerading as bonus opportunities for the player. They are not bonus opportunities. They are additional tolls on a journey you are already being charged for. The game of blackjack is not dead. The best version of it has been removed from the most visible locations where it used to live and replaced with a version that looks identical and performs completely differently. The best version still exists. It exists downtown. It exists in the locals casino market. It exists in Reno, where the Peppermill and the Atlantis, and several other properties still deal games that would be recognizable to a player from 1985 as the game they remember. It exists in Atlantic City, where the competitive pressure of the market has kept several properties dealing favorable rules to retain the serious gambler who can easily drive to Pennsylvania or New York if the local product is not competitive. It exists at the Beau Rivage in Biloxi, which has maintained favorable game rules as part of a broader commitment to genuine player hospitality that the channel has documented in several previous videos. The player who knows where to look and who has done the 4 hours of work to learn basic strategy is still playing the game that the mathematician called the best bet in the casino. They are playing it at properties that are not on the Las Vegas Strip. The Strip made blackjack almost impossible to win. The alternatives made it possible again. The only remaining question is whether you know the difference between the game that was and the game that replaced it. After this video, you do.